to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, can you take roll call, please?
Mr. Anderson? Here. Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Mr. Kern?
Here.
Mr. McCucci? Mrs. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Akmanowitz?
Here.
Mrs. Weed?
Here.
Mr. Diliberto?
Here.
And Mr. Klein.
Here. Okay, a couple of announcements. There was an executive session prior to the meeting to discuss a personnel matter. The meeting is being recorded by the board secretary. The first order of business is approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the June 6, 2019 meeting?
So moved.
Ms. Weed, second.
Second.
Mr. Kern, discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. That brings us to the general public comment. Madam Secretary, do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
George Del Rossi?
Hello, everyone. My name is George Del Rossi. I'm a resident in Quakertown School District. I have a 13-year-old homeschooled daughter who is hoping to attend a vet program at the tech school. When inquiring about the tech school and how we would go about getting her enrolled, I received a letter from Dr. Harner stating that, and I quote, "The Quakertown Community School District does not support homeschooled students at Upper Bucks County Technical School." Right? I was very surprised at that response, not only as a taxpayer in the school district, but more as a parent whose children should be given equal opportunity as every other student in the district. Okay, I have some questions about, like, and I don't deal with the school district. These may seem like stupid questions, but for someone like me, so there's the school board, which is everybody sitting here, who then makes policies, and then the superintendent deals with the school districts going by those policies. Am I correct in how it lays out there? Okay.
Don't forget that the educational department at the state dictates
The state,
a
the state's
tremendous
up top, right?
amount of what we do here.
Okay. So I have some literature that I got off of the website, the school board's policy manual. And in policy manual, section 100, it clearly states, and I'll read right from here, if a private school student or homeschool student is a resident of the district, the student is able to receive career and technical education under the dual enrollment provision of the school code. This provision expressly allows students attending non-public schools to dually enroll in both the non-public school and the public school in order to participate in programs offered at vocational schools. Okay, so with that, I read that and it just seems pretty cut and dry to me that opportunity should be given to my daughter. So, like I said, being new at this, I came here to address everybody. I don't know, maybe it could be explained to me.
Policy, it's been updated 5 times since 2014.
Okay. This is currently the one that is on your website that me as a layperson just went on the website.
117, was that correct?
It's 137.
Oh, 137.
So I mean, I'm not privy to what is the latest. I just go on what is there currently, and I don't understand why, if there's an updated one, it's not the one that's on the website. So,
Mr. Kuzo, is there an archive of old policies on the website?
No, all our policies right now address the board docs and all our updated policies. I don't see it online.
Are you referring to perhaps the AR that's attached?
About tech,
So what's the date, effective date, January?
January 28, 2016 is on the computer.
is on the computer.
Sir, yes. I'm not sure where you're looking, but it's not.
It's not going to be on the website, it's on board docs.
But you get the board docs from the website.
Sure. It's on page 3, the specific.
Which one's 115?
Can we confirm the policy we're reviewing at this point?
We are looking at 137.
115.
We're looking at 115.
Okay. It does state that under policy 115, it does state if a private school or homeschool student is a resident of the district, the student is able to receive career and technical education under the dual enrollment provision of the school code. And while you all are reviewing that, this is actually something that was brought to my attention by a friend of mine who has students enrolled in homeschool as well and was interested in, and my first reaction, not really understanding what all of the parameters were, was why not? And if perhaps we could explain that, maybe what you explained to me in regards to why that is, that we don't provide that, and we used to provide that. Is that correct?
Not since I've been here, but since I've been here with the policy committee, the board has met at least 5 different times because they updated the 137, which is the home education program.
Mr. Rossi, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Obviously, we need to do some research into this and find out where the discrepancy lies.
Okay.
I'm going to ask Dr. Harner to take that on and then to, get back to you with an explanation of why this is.
Plus, we also have August, we have 2 board meetings in August, or at least one before the school year starts. And
Okay,
if the board-
before we
if the
conclude,
board-
though-
If the board changes its position.
Okay.
But it's been almost every year, that's why we have 5 updates and challenges. Homeschool parents have come in, met with the policy committee, and that's why it is on 137 under home education.
But the other policy does conflict with that.
I see that,
This is an ongoing issue.
okay? Well, we'll have to get on the policy committee then, and tackle it, and then have the conversation in early August before the academic year starts, so the parents can have an answer. We have time for the board to address it. If the board wants to do that, then that's fine. But it's the previous discussions every year. I think Mr. Kern, Mr. Klein, and now Ms. Weed have been chairs of the committee. Each year we get a question like this, and that's where the refinement comes in under 137, which I see over here that it conflicts.
Did
Thank you,
this
sir,
ever
for
come
bringing
forward
that
to the
to our
policy
attention.
committee, are you aware of that?
No, I wasn't until tonight, but
Yeah,
we'll
I didn't
put it
think-
on the next meeting agenda, which is in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
And, I mean, my secondary part to that would be what you said, Ms. Mitchell, like, if there is conflicting issues here, my ultimate answer is, why not? My ultimate question is, why not? Even if the policy is revised and it doesn't say this, I have a hard time understanding why not. Could anybody explain that to me?
I think that it's probably more complex answer to that, and I
Okay.
really do want to make sure that we get an answer to that. Is
Okay.
it okay if we would have
And we-
Dr. Harner follow up with you maybe in the next
Well, invite
week or
them to the
so?
policy meeting on it, let them come and participate and understand the background of the
Right.
137, and this is the first time I've seen this one, so.
But
Okay.
we will get a clarification for
Absolutely.
you.
And
Very
just
grateful.
one
We will
other
get it
thing,
resolved.
both the other school districts involved with the tech school do allow it with, there is currently students enrolled from both Palisades and Penridge, and it's only Quakertown that apparently has some kind of issue with it. So, all right, so we'll be invited to the,
Yes,
To
yes, sir,
meeting?
we'll make sure you're.
Policy committee meetings are open to the
Yeah.
public at all times. So you can go on the website, get the correct time and, what room in here it's being held and absolutely come and participate in
Okay.
that. And then, Dr. Harner will get back with you and let you know what's going on.
okay.
I
Our-
apologize for the confusion, by the way.
Our next policy committee meeting is June 27th, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to move that because of my paying job commitments. But we'll move it back probably a week or two after that. So it will be sometime in July, and those are published.
Okay,
Okay.
And we'll make sure you're invited.
Okay,
You get a
great.
special invitation,
All right.
personal invitation.
perfect, thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Amy Einoff?
Hey everyone, my name is Amy Einoff. I live in Milford Township. I have 4 kids currently in the school district. They are going into 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grades. I wanted to speak to the board today about the music program. First, I want to thank the board and the administration for all the support you guys have given to the music program over the years. I think it's wonderful. I am a pro-music parent. I myself was in band, marching band, orchestra, county band, district band, and so is my husband. My kids are also in the band program, and at several concerts we've been to this past year, the directors have made a lot of good points, sometimes in the program, about all the benefits that music gives to our kids. And I think we all are aware of those, and that's not in question. There's a but coming, okay? There is a but. And there's an issue that I would like the board to address. The issue to me is that while the arts are a key part of education, they are not more important than the core curriculum, okay? Currently, music classes are the only classes in the schools that require the kids to be pulled out of their core curriculum classes during the day to go to sectionals, okay? It is the only program that allows that. So if the kids, this is for band and chorus, if the kids miss the sectional, there's an opportunity for them to make it up, but either way, they're missing a class to get an extra band class. Worse still, if they can't make it up, their grade is docked. Okay? So this doesn't make sense. For this policy and this procedure, or however we're running it at the high school and in the middle school, we're forcing our kids to choose between these classes. Let me use my oldest son as an example. He's in several AP classes. He was actually here a couple weeks ago speaking to you guys. He's in several AP classes and honors classes. He's telling me, Mom, I can't miss physics. When I miss physics, the amount of time and effort and frustration it causes me to try and make up that classwork, it's overwhelming. I just can't miss it. And you could fill in other classes. For him, physics was a big one, okay? So we're asking him to skip his AP physics class certain times for a band sectional. Again, I am a pro-band parent. But his solution, he's quitting band. Okay? I'm not happy with this, but how can I argue with him when he's going to get his band grade docked, which goes into his GPA, when he can't go to a sectional? Okay, so the sectionals were not as big of an issue when my kids were younger. They could make up the work fairly easier, but and to be honest, most of the time the kids want to go to sectionals. But the classes, as classes become more complex for your child, whether it's AP physics in high school, or it's somebody who's struggling with math or English, even in the middle school, it is not logical to have them have to make up those classes. It adds unnecessary stress to the kids' days. And we just got an email from the school the other day, earlier this week, about a seminar that we're having on stress in our kids' lives. They are stressing over it. When am I going to make it up? How am I going to make it up? Can I avoid having this hit my grade? It's, it doesn't matter what point in their career they face it, the kids should not have to choose between their core classes and an elective arts class. Sectionals, the purpose of them is to help the kids play better for concerts, and we all enjoy our concerts. But that is not more important than their core curriculum. I think if you ask the teachers, you would find that they are also frustrated with this, and they don't particularly like having their kids pulled out of their classes. And I also have talked to other parents, and they have been frustrated with this. My kid is not the only one who is dropping out of the band program in order to meet his core curriculum requirements. So we are restricting his benefit, his access to all the benefits that the arts provide. We have this great program. Yeah, so I'm all for the program, but I'm asking you to make a change. Do not allow the music classes to require kids to miss core curriculum classes. I'm sure there are some kids who greatly benefit from this, who are maybe planning to study music in college, and that's great. Let them go for it. That fits in their schedule, let them do it. But if sectionals stay, they should be optional based on whether the student can fit it in. And there should be no penalty in grade, no penalty in spirit, and no penalty in their seated chair. So please make a change for this policy so all kids can continue. And I don't have my next child quitting band, and then my next child quitting band, and then finally my fourth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? My daughter had the same kind of conflict. She's out in the audience now, but band was not her thing. That was me. But she was allowed to do recordings for sectionals. Do they still allow that, where you recorded yourself?
They have recordings for homework, but my kids have told me if they don't do the makeup sectional, their grade is impacted.
Okay.
But recordings are in addition.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Keith Krem?
Keith, I hope you got enough to share with everybody.
This guy. It's all right. I had a kid eating in the locker room. He was eating popcorn at like 8 a.m. in Canada a couple weeks ago, so you can go away. I want to thank everybody for just allowing this opportunity for everybody to come in the community and voice concerns. And in my case, I'm actually bringing good rapport and good intentions, and I don't ask anything. Just but a couple minutes of your time here. Hopefully you've been made aware that we, in recent months, have been working hard, Mr. DeLiberto, with community member Marie McNally, have been working hard to get Quakertown Hockey Association, Ice Hockey Association off the ground. I guess I'm the first physical fruition of that, in the sense that I am the head coach as well as hockey director of the program, and I'm just happy to report that we are moving forward with our program. We have an open house on June 25th down at Hatfield. We have over 40 players that are interested. Though we are not supported financially or necessarily tied directly to the district, every player in our program will be wearing a Quakertown jersey and does attend Quakertown School District, either school or cyber school. And so 100% of my players are from Quakertown Community School District. That's really it. We have a great thing going. We have a lot of community interest. Our base is primarily about 75 to 80% travel players, which means that we look to be pretty competitive in our first year. We're playing in the Suburban League, which is based out of Hatfield. It's a good league that does ask that we follow all the PIAA rules, and so it is run very similar to how all the other programs that you have here and that you're running under the athletics department. So that's really it. I just wanted to come out and just say hello, make my face be known. My mom was an educator in Quakertown for 32 years. My dad's a retired superintendent, so God bless you all for everything that you do, and I really appreciate it.
What is, if I may ask a question?
Yeah.
What is the name of the team?
It's Quakertown Hockey Association, and it is the Quakertown Panthers.
It is the Panthers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So.
Well, from an ex-goaltender at Hatboro Horsham, which had a very
There you
similar.
go. I'm a goalie too, yeah, bro.
Okay,
Yeah.
had a very similar arrangement when
Yep.
I played.
Yep.
Good luck.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and we're going to serve you well, represent you well. I promise you that. So, just like I said, it's odd to be talking about starting up hockey in June, but this is where we're getting it done. So, I'll be stopping back and hopefully with good news frequently. All right.
So curious,
Yeah.
for the benefit of the community, everybody who might be watching at home or here.
Yep.
So what does it cost for an individual to be involved in hockey? What's the expected cost
So
for a
normally for a
participant
travel
player?
program, we're looking like $2,500 to $3,500. We're anticipating somewhere around the $1,200 mark. So that's the biggest thing with community-based hockey is that there is a larger access level. Hockey is an expensive sport, and it's unique in the sense that you have to have an ice rink to play it in, and there's costs associated with that maybe aren't associated with field-based sports. So yeah, we're looking right around that $1,200 mark, and we're looking to get that out to the public that, we are a more affordable option. I bring with me the resources. I'm in charge of 600 kids, up in Lehigh Valley in terms of their skill development and programming for ice hockey. And so I'm bringing a whole host of professional resources, to these kids, at a much, much cheaper rate. And I live here, my kids go to school here. Like I said, my mom taught here her entire teaching career. I take a great deal of pride in being able to contribute that back to you guys. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
There's one other thing.
Yes.
So if there's like cost prohibitive, there's an organization in Quakertown called Pride of Quakertown.
Yep.
That raises funds for kids that can't necessarily afford it.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to try to hook up with them, and maybe they can help offset some of the costs. It's a charitable
Yeah, for sure.
organization. And
Absolutely.
It's made up of like community people. So.
No, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, like I said to Gary when we were talking to him, the outpouring of support has been fantastic from the district, from the parents, from the kids, even from the league. Everybody's really excited. It was a pleasant surprise. I wasn't sure what kind of interest there would be, and it's overwhelming. So we're really happy to have Keith with us, and Jen Bishop and Marie McNally has been really instrumental in helping get this off the ground. So thanks, everybody.
Exciting.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Can I say go Blues? Because I used to live in St. Louis. And Jordan Bennington, the goalkeeper. Yeah, it was a great game.
So that's everybody that was pre-signed up. Does anybody else have any comment at this time? Okay. There is no superintendent's report this meeting, so we'll move to the fiscal agenda. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped right over the standing committee reports. How could I? First up is the Education Curriculum Committee. Mr. Anderson.
Okay, we had a fairly brief meeting tonight. We talked about student reports to the board, and we talked about school data and how it's used. And we were talking about a new program to replace the Decision Ed program. That's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Next up is the Quakertown Community Education Foundation. Mr. Jackson.
The Ed Foundation just met on Tuesday. The big thing, if you recall from previous reports, is that we were looking to spend $25,000 or up to make a big splash on something, and we did select a program. I'm sorry for the tease. I don't want to say what it is because I'm not sure if it's even been let out which program is going to receive the money. So. We were able to find an educational thing. I see Ms. Leska. It's okay to say what it is? Okay. The program we selected was to purchase some additional reading materials, study materials, lesson materials for the 4th and 5th graders district-wide. And it's something that that's going to be in the libraries for these core classes. In every school district or every elementary school, 4th and 5th grade reading level going forward. So we thought that was a very good use of the money.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Okay, this brings us to a public comment on the fiscal items being presented for a vote tonight. Seeing nobody, we will move to the fiscal agenda. On the fiscal agenda is approval of the May 2019 Boucher and James bills list. So do I have a motion to accept and approve the fiscal agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that was Mr. Akmanowitz and Mr. Anderson. Discussion? No discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
One abstention.
One abstention. Ms. Mitchell, what's your vote? Yeah, okay. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to the fiscal consent agenda. On the fiscal consent agenda is approval of the May 2019 bills list, approve the May 2019 treasurer's report, approve budget transfers for 2019. Do I have a motion to approve the fiscal consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Jackson, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Anderson, discussion?
There is one bill on here. I'm just trying to find it. I just had a curious who it was. Fair World Academy. Anybody tell me what that?
Sure. That's an approved private school that some of our special education students attend, and I believe it's for extended school year as well as the contract for next year.
Okay, thank you. That is all.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of accepting the fiscal consent agenda as presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up is public comment on the human resources items being presented for a vote tonight. Okay, no public comment on the human resource consent agenda. On the human resource consent agenda is administrative staff, professional staff, support staff, substitute staff, a settlement agreement as well. Do I have a motion to accept the human resources consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Ekmanowitz, do I have a second?
Second it.
Mr. Anderson, discussion.
Sir, I would like to have Ms. Edwards talk about our new high school principal.
Oh, sure.
Vote first?
No vote.
Hasn't been voted yet.
Discussion.
Okay, no, it's discussion right now.
We're in the discussion phase, right?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I thought you were going to just comment about this or that. I didn't know you were part of convincing them how to vote.
No, I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying to, for the audience and for the.
I was going to ask, so.
I was glad to see his name on there here. It's good.
Indeed. On the agenda tonight is Matt Van Hoenderdaal, and pronouncing his name correctly will be one of our first tasks that we undertake in his orientation. Matt has his own school's graduation this evening, and that's why he was not able to attend. He is graduating what will be his last senior class at his former school. Matt is the principal of an IB campus school in Lower Bucks County, and he's been in that position since 2014. He developed that program from scratch as his school expanded into the high school level. He mentors graduate students at the University of Pennsylvania and has served as an IB coordinator, among other things. Originally, he taught math for a number of years at the middle school and high school levels. The process that we went through to select the principal went through multiple rounds of interviews, including an interview with a stakeholder group that included students, parent representatives, teacher representatives, and other administrative representatives, and that group was unanimous in recommending that we move forward. And then Matt did have an interview with the board, so you all got to meet him last week. We are fortunate that he is going to be able to start on July 1st. He already has created a very detailed entry plan that we're augmenting with some orientation activities, and he'll be able to join us for part of summer leadership next week as well to get started. And I know he is looking forward to meeting his new community, parents, students, his faculty, and digging in to do the work of taking our high school to the next level. So we're very pleased to bring this recommendation to you tonight, and Matt is very sorry that he couldn't be here in person.
It's understandable why. Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Any further discussion on the human resource consent agenda? All those in favor of accepting the human resource consent agenda as presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next is public comment on policies and program items being presented for vote tonight. Seeing nobody raising their hand, we'll move to the policy and programs consent agenda. On the policy and programs consent agenda, we have approved contract with Keystone Freedom Academy for the 2019 extended school year, approved contract with Keystone Freedom Academy for 2019-2020 school year, approved contract between Council of Southeastern Pennsylvania, Inc. and Quakertown Community School District for the 2019-2020 school year, approve a revised waiver agreement for student number 21981. Do I have a motion to accept the policy and programs consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Jackson, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Rachmanowitz, discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next is the board discussion on 2019-2020 district superintendent goals. So we have a draft of the goals, and I believe there's going to be a presentation of those, sir?
Yes, sir. Good evening. I just want to give you a brief intro and then hand it off to Ms. Edwards, as she has been the architect of these goals for quite some time, and their development. The last week we had our initial presentation of our goals for the 2019-2020 academic school year. We listened to your feedback. We met the next day for a couple hours on Friday, worked on them over the weekend, came back and met on Monday. We received inputs, and we're very grateful for your inputs. I'll let Ms. Edwards get into details of the new structure format, and hopefully we have met your expectations.
Hey, thank you. They are posted in board docs, and we had sent them out via email, I think, on Tuesday. I think that was right. So after receiving all the feedback and listening to the comments that everybody had, and thank you to those of you that sent us some additional feedback, this is how we approached incorporating all of that into a collaborative final document. We did streamline a little bit so that we were increasing our focus on things that were more directly related to student achievement, and also where we had an objective measure that we could use in terms of the metrics. We did add metrics to the original list and made them more grade level specific so that we would be more transparent in showing our progress, the progress of a cohort from year to year. There was some other conversation about setting ranges within the metrics so that it was clear what level of attainment we had, and so we have done that with all the ones that are numerical, so that there's a definition of what it means to meet the target, to exceed the target, to partially meet the target, or to not meet the target. So those things were added. And we defined which metrics are used for which goal. So on the metric sheet, it clarifies which metrics apply to which aspect of the goals. What else do we do? I think those were the major changes. So as you look through the document, in Domain 1, that is now half the measurement for completion is based on the metrics that are identified, and those are student achievement measures. We did use multiple measures, which is a good practice instead of a single high-stakes test. We do more regular assessment of students through NWEA and through DIBELS that we can use to demonstrate progress over the course of the year. So we'll be able to do more regular reporting as opposed to a once a year, this is what the result was. And so domain 1 is 50% based on the action plans, 50% on the metrics. In domain 2 is 50-50 again. And in the discipline area, we use the benchmarks of quality in order to have an objective measure of a building's progress on their PBIS systems. So there's an objective measure in that aspect. We really didn't feel right. Most of safety, of course, is a yes, no, you did it or you didn't. We really didn't feel right cutting down safety or saying because it doesn't have an objective measure, it doesn't belong in there. I think it's an important message to our community and our whole organization about the importance of safety to retain that. So that is a yes-no measure, as are the operational goals. So we've invested a lot of time as a team trying to be responsive to the feedback and the comments and the suggestions as we've worked through this over the last, I guess, more than a month. And so this is what we would be presenting to you this evening for your consideration. And if there are questions about any of the individual items or the way that the metrics are structured or anything, I'd be happy to answer those.
I had a question on the metrics. So we talked about benchmarking, and is it like first grade math shows at 79%? So then is that then cohort into what they finish at second grade?
Yes, all of the metrics would measure cohorts.
Okay.
Because otherwise it's really kind of random. Obviously you want every grade level to improve every year, but if you have a group of students in third grade that are at a 56% level of proficiency, and third grade the year before was at 80%, you're not going to get 56 to 82 in a single year.
So then like for first grade math at 79, you would look for to exceed your target, get that number to 82.
In the next year, in second grade, they would need to be at 82. So we need to move at least 2% more students into proficiency or meeting their growth goals.
And is that overall as a district, or is that like give like elementary school by elementary school?
We will calculate it for each individual school, but for the purpose of the metric, it would be an aggregate.
And then some are blank because the scores haven't reported yet? Or?
We don't, we worked on, initially we thought we could get most of our baseline data in there in time for tonight. That turned out to be a very unrealistic thought process. So we put in what we have, but we need to go through and make sure that all that information is accurate in terms of exactly what the baselines are. And we need to write reports that will consistently calculate the answer to the solution to the metrics the same way in every year. So that work remains to be done to make sure that our measurement is consistent.
And then I think we talked last week when it was presented, how you guys review data on a 6-day cycle and the adjustments that can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Sure, and it looks a little bit different in every building because every building has their own specific methodology. But essentially, teachers either by grade level or sometimes by subject matter meet regularly in a data team format or an inquiry format, and they look at various pieces of student data, and sometimes it's objective data and sometimes it's samples of student work. So for example, if they're working on a particular writing convention, then they might collaboratively as a grade level examine some writing samples of students to see where students are with that particular convention, and then they might use specific strategies to improve the students' use of that convention, and then come back the next time and review the next sample of work to see what happens. So some of it is qualitative that way, and some of it is quantitative data. The key to all of it is that from that collaborative discussion of data, they come out of those meetings with some kind of action steps that they intend to pursue to either increase achievement in that area or address misconceptions about whatever that topic is with students. So it does operate in a cycle, where you're trying something, you're coming back and evaluating how it worked, and then you're trying the next thing and cycling around again and coming back and seeing what the impact was.
So it's more constant adjustments, like you're just not waiting for these scores to come out to make adjustments?
No, absolutely not.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Questions? So with regards to the DIBEL assessments, these are performed, is that 3 times a year? Is that what we talked about?
NWA is 3 times a year. DIBELS is DIBELS 3 times a year also, Dr. Hoffman?
It depends on the grade level.
Okay.
So that was one of, there are certain things that we have to work through with this. We talked about, because it's second grade math, right? We only give it at the end of the year. We have to think about whether or not we can measure from the year prior to the next year, things like that. We want to make sure we have a consistent way to measure, but also that we can clearly articulate to you if there are differences between the grade levels. That's why we didn't want to put all of that data in there until we.
So with regards to that, I guess my question is, how would you be able to track this throughout the school year to know if you're on target for meeting, exceeding, or you're falling below, so that you would make adjustments? That's really the whole point of it. So I'm just curious as how you would get to that end point.
Right, so we took your feedback, and when we adjusted these metrics, that's why we included so many more data points per grade level. Like, for instance, and sorry, I was just talking about NWEA in math, right? Not DIBELS, but the theory is that by including assessments that we give more regularly throughout the year, instead of only looking at the PSSA data, which we get after school is out, we would be able to not only present the information to you more regularly, but also we already use it in our own practice. So we have our data meetings at every building. Teachers are looking at the data, but now we would also be able to bring that as part of a progress check on how we're doing towards these metrics. So it would be the individual conversations we're already having with teachers and in buildings that the principals are doing, but then also a way of updating our metrics on a more regular basis with progress, rather than only being able to bring them to you in July or August because they were on a sole measure of PSSA. So now we can be looking at how are we doing on each of the tests. You'll see, in some of the grade levels for literacy, we're saying we're going to look at the PSSA, we're going to look at DIBELS, and we're going to look at NWEA, and then be able to judge how we're meeting that goal. So that's the feedback that we heard would be helpful to be able to more regularly report on the data. And we talked about that at the Ed Committee today, wanting to make sure that we were giving next year more regular updates on the data that we were receiving.
So if everyone, I passed around an example of, if you're wondering what did I pass out, this is a Phoenixville area school district superintendent goals. And I think it's a really great best practice for us to take a look at. To say I'm disappointed is an understatement right now. Most of these goals are still based on percentage completion of action plans, which we stated, I believe, very clearly in the last meeting, that does not tell us how well something was done. Not only that, this is completely unclear. If I were to try to present something like this to my boss, I'd get ripped another one, because this is just a hot mess. All these different percentages. So I didn't even realize that today we were going to be sitting here going through the same thing we did last week. My understanding was that we were going to have an actual work session collaboration with the rest of the district, where we would actually be able to discuss this at a table where we normally do in a retreat setting, where we can actually, bounce off ideas, brainstorm, try to understand what everyone's priorities are, and almost go through each of them and say, X this, let's add this, like where's everybody's priority stands. You know, I'm beyond frustrated. So just to give an example, if you look on page 2, an example of how we can simplify this is when you take a look at scores, okay? Okay. The high-quality instruction. Make significant progress in closing the achievement gap by 10% at each level, elementary, middle, and high schools, compared to the 2018 level of achievement gap. Now, I understand that there's probably some other details that are in there. Keystone proficiency, better at the 11th grade cohort, release date will be a minimum of 80%. Do you see how very objective these goals are? And they're so high level that it gives the latitude of the administration to creatively figure out how they're going to accomplish these goals. When talking about proper planning and implementation of special education services, it goes on to say 95% of parents who respond to a survey will indicate they agree strongly, agree that their children had a positive transition. The only time I feel it's relevant to have a pass, fail, yes, no would be an example that they have here. Administration will educate the board and community on the sleep start time topic to bring to the board for a vote in November 2018. That would be a yes, no. Another yes, no would be the district will hold 2 town halls, is on page 3, one related to the budget and one related to school safety. Did you do it or you didn't do it? Otherwise, I mean, in a business setting, you have to, first of all, in a business setting, you're not allowed to make your own goals. Sorry, doesn't happen that way. But somehow, that's how we're running things here.
Ma'am, on that point, just on the point, contractually with me and with your administrative team, we we mutually agree to these goals. Just on that point.
I'm very clear on that, and I appreciate you mentioning that.
Thank you.
That they should be mutually agreed on. But one of the most important things the board should do is to, again, work with the administration to collaborate and talk about these things. Not you give me a list of what you think your goals should be, and basically I agree to them and make no changes. That is not giving the board. I have an obligation to the taxpayers in this community. That is why I ran to be on this board, not to rubber stamp goals that are vapid and, very unclear. They're not objective, and if you take a look at the contract states that these should be objective performance standards. Now, that being said, I haven't even gotten into the incentive pay, which no one in this board was even clear on how that got paid out until I brought it up and demanded to understand how incentive pay gets paid. We still really don't, I feel like we still are very unclear on that. When I asked about how the incentive pay was going to work for this upcoming year, I still didn't get a lot of clear answers on that. And I had made a suggestion, so I'm not just showing concern. I made a suggestion, and in the business world, when you have an incentive pay, that's something that you get paid above and beyond something that you're doing, okay? So if you were to receive a proficient rating in the business world, you wouldn't get 96.6% of your incentive pay, which is what happened last year. But not one person on this board voted to say that we would approve such parameters. We never voted on any parameters for the incentive pay as long as I've been on this board. Could someone correct me if I'm wrong?
They were voted on last June, ma'am.
The incentive pay.
Which is tied to the goals, which is part of.
Who made that? Who made that understanding? So let me read your contract.
It's been a part of.
Jeff, would you please would you please add some commentary here? If
I don't have the contract in front of me, so
Mhm.
I'm sort of standing here or sitting here without expert knowledge at the moment.
So it states, any increase in the compensation of superintendent as a result of the annual evaluation by the Board of School Directors should not be added, blah, 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 to the base salary. To that end, the parties acknowledge that the performance incentive pay is tied to the actual work performance of the superintendent. The objective performance standards and performance goals for the incentive pay shall be established annually for each school year in accordance with this agreement. This agreement provides an objective method of calculating the incentive payment, and the school district is obligated by the terms of this agreement to pay the superintendent the performance incentive pay increase if the objective performance standards and goals are met. Now, you might wonder, well, what does it say about those standards? Previous paragraph 4 states, with respect to the Board of School Directors' evaluation of the superintendent's performance, it shall be based upon an objective performance standard to be mutually agreed on, as you mentioned, by the superintendent and the Board of School Directors, which objective performance standards may be based upon, but not limited to the following criteria. That's key. May be based upon, but not limited to. So it goes on, achievement of annual measurable objectives established by the Board of School Directors, which in this case would be the goals that we're discussing now, which, while we're here to mutually agree, we had very little input in creating the actual goals. It goes on to talk about PSSAs, keystones, student growth, attrition, and all of ACT scores and things like that. So it's pretty clear to me, at least, again, if I'm wrong, someone please let me know, that the parameters for the incentive pay should be clear and agreed upon by the school board.
I do remember, I think I might have made a suggestion to relax some of the percentages by which they got dinged, if I recall.
That was yeah, but that was like after the fact, right?
Well, that was part of their measures. I remember that spreadsheet, like if you missed something by 1/10%, you didn't get it. And that was out of like 80%. I was like, oh, geez. Now, I know, some people wanted to hold them too much tighter. Well, you missed by 1/10% out of 80%. So I do remember voting on that and relaxing the requirements, so they would get more credit for being that close.
Right, but was that?
We did vote on that, and that was,
Was that on incentive pay?
mind-numbingly, well, it had to do with what you're just reading it had to do with the calculation of did they meet XYZ requirement to get a certain percentage of the incentive pay spread out. And it's not just to these guys, right? The incentive pay goes out to, 40 people, 100 people, I don't know how many people. It impacts more than just their salary. It's, it's the administration plus their team, and it's a bit of a trickle down. So I do remember we voted on that, and it was mind-numbingly complex.
When did we vote on that? Because if you vote for something, it has to be done in public. Where and when was there a vote done on that?
I remember, I can't remember, I thought it was, I don't remember what meeting it was at. I do remember, because it was the whole green, yellow, red.
Exactly, you're exactly right. And they were being dinged, literally. So I just remember like, oh, man, you missed it by 1/10%, you get nothing?
Right.
That sounds harsh.
Like
But that's
3-point
not-
swing or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
So maybe you weren't here.
I would love for someone to follow up and tell me that, because why is it taken until now then that I've been asking about this and pushing and pushing and pushing and asking how the incentive pay was determined, and just now I'm starting to get more answers on this.
Specifically around.
It wasn't around incentive pay.
I do remember it was a portion of it, but it wasn't.
Right.
My understanding, and again, I don't even remember what meeting it was at.
So I think you raised some points that we should start earlier in the next year to work on the next year's goals, so that we're not, because right now you want to change things so radically, and time is a little bit of the essence. And so I
So
think we should-
basically, when you put people in a position, the way I feel like it's is like this. You put people in a position where you rush them and you get them to the point where you believe there's going to be a collaboration, and then surprise, no collaboration. There's no time. We can't radically change anything. I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. This is irresponsible when it comes
No, it's
to
not.
our role. And the fact that no one's questioning, it is my opinion, you feel free to have your own. But the fact that no one has even understood up until now
I've
what
understood it the whole
parameters were
time.
incentive pay, then why didn't you tell me that? I don't know, how many months when I called you, you had no idea?
I offered to tell you to write the equation on the board in the back room a long time ago when it first came up. I could write the equation,
I do.
but nobody wanted to see it.
There's a part of me that is a little bit, I agree with Caitlin. So let's go back to last year. Last year, we had a retreat where we sat down and we worked through setting the goals that we agreed upon. So I thought last week we were going to do that. I expressed my concern in the executive session that we didn't do that. I thought we were going to do it this week, where we're going to go into an executive session and again have a dialogue, a couple-hour dialogue on goals. Doesn't appear that that's happening either. So there is a little bit of me that I expressed it last week, that I was caught off guard, that we actually had a full-blown meeting last week and a full-blown meeting this week when one of them was supposed to be a goal-setting meeting, and that didn't happen. And so I don't know why it didn't happen, but we talked about
I think it
that.
was
We
a
talked about-
procedural thing, that there was some sort of.
We were going to switch the meeting
And
around
we
and
couldn't,
have
right.
this week be the meeting.
Right.
Because
We
there
had
was
two
only
public
one
meetings
meeting
scheduled.
on the calendar.
Yeah.
We didn't have two, we added one.
And then
And that
it-
was done at the last retreat.
Right, and it had to do with, we left the retreat with one idea about what the meetings were going to be, and then that wasn't possible to do it the way we envisioned it because of whatever the regulations or rules were about the way the meetings were published and what we had to do with the vote for the budget and that kind of thing. So it scuttled our plans that we had assumed we were all going to do it a different way, and then we weren't allowed to do it that way, through no fault of anyone's.
I mean, to some extent, I had a chance to read over these a couple times on the plane, and I agree. I don't know that there's any more. I mean, there's some more meat around certain aspects of the goals. I do like the changes that were made to the academics, and that's why I asked. I hope we can see those throughout the year. We know how well we're doing. I think that was a push for us to, and Mr. Anderson, I think you were the one that was saying there are portions of our academics that we're falling behind on. And it's been a concern of yours raised on multiple occasions. And that's really where we want to glean an eye for it. Same thing with the finances, and we discussed dashboards and things like that, which we're appreciative that they're put in there. So, we're trying to set it up so that under each pillar we have clear goals and measurable data that we can look at. Is it 100%, Kaylin? I agree, it's not. And
It's a hot mess. You would never in a business environment have, give your boss your own goals. Then what is our job here? We should, as a board, be understanding what are our priorities, and then the superintendent and administration share theirs, and we work together.
I do want to say, I mean.
This is no togetherness.
I do write my goals, but my goals are based on the board's goals. So the board sets a goal for the CEO, and underneath the CEO has big, high-level goals, and then,
right.
I try to align my goals with something that matches that goal. So.
Right, they're not going to be in your knickers. So yeah, I agree.
So you said the goal, but the board, you said they are the ones who.
I imagine our CEO sets. I imagine it's kind of collaborative. Again, I don't sit at those meetings, so I have no idea how they're done. All I know is that we get handed goals, and then we try to align different goals with those. So I think it is somewhat more common, but I agree that it's probably more agreed upon. And it's done in an avenue of which we sit down and we have discussions. I have discussions with my bosses back and forth in order to get to that endpoint, so.
I think what Kaylin is really trying to say is, though, the sample that she gave out is a really great idea of what at least some of us, I think, meant when we said some caliber of rating, right? Rather than the yes, no checkbox.
And I read that, I mean, she put it in her email. This is the same document that you put in your email, right, Kaylin?
Yeah.
This-
And this is clear, this is it's very high level, it's very clear. And I wanted to ask Jeff, the contract states that these goals should be objective.
It does, you're right.
And in your opinion, do you feel like the way it stands, that are these goals objective?
I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I've never gotten a copy of the revisions that were made since our last meeting. I had the original set from last week, but never got a copy of what was changed that was discussed tonight.
So nothing was,
Objective means it should be some third party could look at it, look at the data and say yes or no. That's what objective means.
Right, and at the back of the revised document, there's, 3 pages of mind-numbingly tedious objectives that talk about percentages.
that applies to 2 of the goals, if you spent the time to look at it. And
did,
I hate
and-
to say, but when you put a whole bunch of numbers in there, sure, it confuses the heck out of people, and then they're like overwhelmed, and like, this is way more complicated data. All we needed to have was something that simply says, we want to achieve a 10% increase in this level and these particular subjects or something like that. But instead, we have 2 pages of measurements that,
But who's to say Phoenixville is smarter than these folks?
Right,
that is an ad hominem.
No,
Because,
my point is,
like-
they're much more detailed about the levels to potentially get to what you're talking about here.
Not to be defensive, but given that Ms. Mitchell, Kaylin shared with all of us this sample, we drilled down. This school district has 15% less poverty than us. We outperform them.
Okay, can we talk about the actual issues here and
Yes,
not
ma'am.
talk
Yes,
about
ma'am.
the
Thank
district
you.
itself?
Then let me go.
We're
My floor,
discussing,
ma'am.
let's
My
stay on
floor.
Superintendent
My
talk,
floor
please.
now, ma'am.
Stay on the position,
Ma'am,
please.
I listened to you
Harner
for 10
finish,
minutes.
please.
I'd like to have the floor. Thank you. Consider the mechanism for gathering parent and student feedback, quality of instruction, communications, and quality of extracurricular activities, and teach effectiveness. Present recommendations to the board by 18-19 school year. Yes or no? That's out of the Phoenixville example you gave. Most of their examples that you have in their document is identical. It's the pictures that are different. And if you have the performance measures, ours are much more significant. That's why we've had the student achievement gains that we've had. We've asked the folks out here and the teachers in the classroom who do most of the hardest part of the work to get great stuff done, and they've done that. And this has been the format, the game plan, the war plan for the last 5-6 years.
It's not anymore, though. Please stop saying that. It's not. My job and our job here on the board is to try and utilize taxpayers' money the best way possible to offer the best education that we can possible. And I'm not saying that this has to be what we need to do. This is an example of clear goals. And it's very high level. You don't have any measurements for, if you look at domain number 2, no measurable goals there, pass, fail. Domain number 3, pass, fail. Domain, here I'm scrolling down, 4, pass, fail. Domain number 5, pass, fail. Or excuse me, domain number 1 and 2, 4, number 1 and 2. So almost all of these goals still have no measurable outcomes. I like what you guys did in attempts to try and tie domain number 1 to student performance. I appreciate that. However, if you look at all the domains, so example in here, let's see. Not to say this is not an important goal. Provide increased opportunities for autonomy at the building level. How are you going to measure that? To know that we are successful in that? None of, and so for the only goals, the only domains that we actually have measurable goals for as it stands is domain 1 and 2. And it doesn't even encompass all of domain 1 and 2. So pardon my frustration, but the reason I am frustrated and the reason why I'm very vocal tonight is I feel like we've been trying, like we've given ample opportunities to try and get this right. And this is still in no way, I would not know how we would measure almost every single one of these goals. And if you can't measure a goal, what's the point?
Ms. Edwards, you put together this document, correct?
Yes, we all worked together on it as a team, and I distilled it into a document.
Okay. I understand it. I think there's a lot of detail put in there, which for me personally is always a good thing. I've reviewed it several times when it was emailed out. Obviously, there's been a lot of work put into that, and I think it certainly addressed my concerns from the previous meeting when I said I wanted to clearly see how this was going to be determined, and you've done that. So I just want to say I like it. I think it's great. I appreciate all the hard work that must have gone into that, and so thank you for that.
Thank you. I will accept that thanks on behalf of the entire team who has worked
Okay,
very hard.
sir, could you please tell me then, since we only have measurable goals for domains 1 and 2, how are you satisfied with the rest of the domains that we have no measures of success on those domains?
Ms. Mitchell, I'm not going to debate this with you, okay?
Why can't you just, why? Isn't that what we're there to do?
You have
Here to do?
made your point clearly that you're unhappy with this.
I'm just asking you to defend your logic. If you don't defend it, then you can't speak to it.
To me, the document is clear. That's my logic. I understand it. There's a lot of supporting evidence with it. It's clearly spelled out.
Well, you guys got about 6 more months to get away with this crap.
Any other discussions?
So could you answer that question? How do you measure certain ones that maybe are a little bit more subjective? Like what is the plan?
The ones that are measured by action plan completion are mostly ones that a building or all of the buildings or departments are responsible for, and they will have action plans with strategies that support what the intent of the goal is, and they present their action plans with evidence of completion at the end of the year so that we can demonstrate that we met met the requirements of the goal. And we do have all of that supporting evidence, which has been provided by all of our building principals and department leaders for the 18-19 year, and it is a significant body of evidence, and they did a significant body of work to move the school district forward.
And let me explain my interpretation of it, if it helps. So the Domain 1, culture for teaching and learning, the ultimate goal is to improve the student metrics, right? And so they have a list of what I might call tactics to achieve this strategic goal. The increased student learning, the number 1, A through E. That's a list of tactics that they plan to implement. So,
do tactics belong in goals?
Well, they're giving, sure, maybe you have a point that maybe we need an executive summary to make it simpler. Okay, here, let me just pull up all these things into one executive summary, a little bit like the table you have, some high-level stuff. But just looking at the document as it is, how I interpreted this level of specificity is they have collaborated amongst their experts to say if we do 1 A through E, we should achieve the actual metric that we all care about.
What is it?
It's that giant list of improved scores and things like that across all the
Outside
grade
of that,
levels.
domains 3 through
And the
5
rest
have
are
nothing.
The rest are just saying that, did we do these things that we think are necessary along the way? Frankly, you know, it's a little bit, it's almost like I would tend to want to give them more freedom to say if they're halfway through and they think one of the tactics isn't working, I'm not going to judge you on that if you substitute something else that you think is going to work. So I almost take the elements that they say are going to be done to achieve this goal as that's up to them. I'm cool with that. That's what they think they need to do to make the real change happen in student performance. So pass, fail, did you develop and implement an intervention period at the elementary level? That's kind of a yes or no to me. To address the different levels of student needs, they think that if they do that, they'll improve the overall scores. I'm not going to debate that with them because they have
We
given us.
shouldn't debate tactics, and that's not what we're here to do. We're here to talk about goals. And you give the administration more freedom to actually go about the tactic if you give them a very high-level goal. Okay? Their tactics should not be put in here. And look, I think that there was a lot of effort that went into putting in a lot of details in here and explaining how, you know, these goals, how the purpose behind them. But I don't believe that these are reflective of the board priorities because there never was a conversation that could have been had. So for instance, we've talked a lot about teacher satisfaction, staff satisfaction surveys. Not really, we've talked about that multiple times. Don't see really anything too clear in regards to that. We've talked about.
Well, that's something to do. How would that be a goal?
So if you look at, as an example, again, one thing that I thought was really neat about the Phoenixville one, and again, it doesn't have to be the exact one that we use, but they have something called a Net Promoter Score. And for those of you who are familiar in the business world, they actually use this quite a bit for customer satisfaction. And so, bear with me here just a moment.
Yeah, it's like on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend going to Quakertown School District to your friends and family?
So here would be another goal for me, since we don't have quite a baseline yet, and this would be an example of a pass or fail, right? Create a baseline staff satisfaction survey in collaboration with staff and union members. That would be a pass-fail goal so that we could get a baseline since we don't really quite have one. So I think that's something that majority of the board would be interested in, but it's lost because we didn't have
Is that something
dialogue.
that has to be in here, or we could add that, like we did that before outside of it being in a goal?
If
we
it's
could
a
add that.
priority for us as a board, then it absolutely should be in the goals because this is our one opportunity that we have in the entire year to at a very high level, give the direction to the superintendents and hold them accountable at the end of the year.
But I think also when you're looking at the goals and what was put together by the administration and building leadership, there's things that are left out of this school district's plan that we have in here that go back to not being measured, but I'm glad they're in here, like the service, respect, and diversity piece of it. That they don't have anything in here like this. They don't have anything on safety and wellness. So there's going to be trade-offs. You have to believe that the people who are on the front lines doing this every day kind of understand the areas that they want to focus on. And I think they have taken our feedback. I think this is very detailed compared to what we had last year. They've taken comments that were in the evaluation plan and added it. They've taken comments that were emailed to them on Monday and added it. I think there's going to be a trade-off, and it's not going to be perfect, but the things that we have in here compared to the example that's given, I like ours better because it really puts the student at focus. And it's not always measurable.
But there could be measurable goals. So for instance, for the diversity, the one thing for safety rather, one thing that I would like to see, you want to talk about data, one goal that I would like to see is for us to start tracking from a safety perspective. Like we get these reports as a board on these SRO reports, or how many expulsions or how many suspensions. To me, it's all relative. I have no idea if it's a big problem or not if I don't have historical information to see if it's a spike or if we're on a downward trend. So what I'm asking for is, another a pass-fail goal could be create historical data to reflect some of the issues that we're having with student discipline, so that we as a board can have more informed decision-making when it comes to that, or we can actually see if it's a real big problem or not, because just having the numbers, I can't see if it's a problem or not. I see that it could look concerning, but then if you were to ground yourself and see, well, we're actually on a downward trend for some of the student discipline issues, or when it comes to diversity, we could have a goal of, I'm just giving an example, I know one of the things that is in here is talking about the service day, which is great, but take suggestions from the diversity committee. I'm just giving you examples and report back to the board on this date to implement them or something like that. You guys are satisfied with it, that's fine. I am not satisfied with it. You guys know that already.
I think, so Kayla, you bring up a lot of great points, and I think we have to understand, I think there's going to be things that are measurable and things that are going to be pass or fail, and that's just kind of how it's going to be. And I'm okay with that. I mean, we've seen goals like that in the past. I think they're fine. I do agree that there is some meat. I think your SRO example, disciplinary example, is like a perfect example. Because, John, you sent out the email recently from somebody talking about discipline issues, and we have no context of what does that mean. We hear about it at times. Is it bad? I have no idea.
Well, could that, Ms. Edwards, whoever tracks that, is that something that can be tracked? You know how cities track crime statistics?
Yes.
Why can't we
Yes,
do
we
that
have a lot
with
of that
discipline
data, and
issues?
and collecting some of that data is actually one of the recommendations in the Community Safety Committee report, which is embedded in the goals that we're going to go through and implement a lot of their recommendations. So that's already included in the goals, even though it's not written explicitly.
But with respect to like an objective measurement, can a goal be, okay, let's lessen last year's discipline problems by 10%? I mean, I'm just comparing to what cities do with crime statistics. That's often a goal, and it's a stated goal. It's by percentages. Okay, we're going to reduce crime this next year by 10%. And they implement plans in order to do that. I'm throwing that out as an example. Is that possible to do in a school district setting?
It would help if we had the data first.
Well, yeah, we need the data first, obviously.
If I could say, I would think that add some of these questions, comments, SRO reports, school discipline reports, let's go back in and have that as a topic for a school board meeting. And we'll provide that out in his superintendent's report. That's fine. But I'm trying to get my head around the difference. And if you go through all these from the other school districts' report, was it Phoenixville?
Yes.
Phoenixville report, again, they're 15% less in poverty, and they're one position ahead of us on the U.S. News and World Report. So there's nobody that's poorer than us that outperforms us as a district. But their goal is to present a budget in January. That's the goal. I would love to have that goal. I mean, if we took all the dashboards
You're missing
off
the point entirely, which is continuously frustrating me. You're missing the point.
I do want to say, so when we ask how we got here, why are we looking at some other district's goals, it really comes down to one fundamental thing. We missed a big step this year, guys. We missed the retreat where we sat down and we talked about goals, and we collectively came up with it, which we did last year, which we did. We were all in that together last year.
We did at the mid-year goals report on February 2nd, we spent the whole board meeting most of the board meeting, or the retreat, doing a SWOT analysis of what you wanted us to do.
Correct.
And that's part of this too.
But that was the goals. That's where we worked on, because we all separated, we worked on and then presented to each other where we were focusing last year.
Well, I agree with you. If you want to give us more time, I'm more than happy to have your.
I think when we ask how we got here tonight, we have to agree that we missed that step. So I would think that in order to move this conversation forward tonight, that we have to agree that, next year, I think that's a focus of ours. And I think it will focus on the collaborative approach, which is what I think.
What's stopping us from doing it now?
President Klein, may I interject real quick here? We've had this discussion a number of times. We've gone back and forth on this topic. I would like to move to end debate on this and proceed to the next agenda item.
You have to ask for a vote on that.
I'm making a motion right now.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to end debate and vote on the goals.
No, I'm just making a motion to move to the next agenda item.
Well, that would be voting on this.
We're voting on it, but we're not going to approve it by my motion.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Pardon? Mr. Anderson. Okay. Discussion?
I thought we were voting to end discussion.
I don't think that's appropriate to end it. I think we're wrapping it up. I think we have time to finalize it. So I think that's absolutely
not
the smartest thing to do.
There's a motion on the floor, so we have to follow through
right,
and
and so
vote
we're
on
having
it.
a discussion
Right.
about it, right? So I think it's wrong.
You were just about to finish.
I think we were trying to get to the end point where we could agree. And so I'm a little bit appalled that you did that, but.
That's apparently how things roll here. You just rush through things so people don't have any time. They have to go along with it because we're short for time. We can't make this change right now.
I would like to see us take more time for next year's goals. If this is what's going to happen and this is how it's going to play out, and we're going to push forward, I would like to see us come up with a little bit more targeted goals. As the year comes up, we as a board, we're going to see these things that come up for the next year, these certain thresholds, and we're going to need to have to write this down for the next year as a board member so that we can bring it up when that retreat comes up for us to do this.
Do we still, we don't even know how the incentive pay, we still don't know about the incentive pay. How is that being determined?
We're now voting on Mr. Jackson's motion and the second to end debate and move on. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
No.
I would say do a roll call because you can't count heads with just a few voices.
Okay.
We still need to talk about incentive pay.
So this is a roll call vote to end the debate or the discussion
On goals.
on the goals.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Kern,
No.
Mr. McCucci,
No.
Ms. Mitchell,
No.
Mr. Akmanowitz,
No.
Mrs. Weed,
No.
Mr. Giliberto,
No.
Mr. Klein.
I'm thinking.
Keep on talking.
Okay, no.
So it's
Mr.
seven-
McCucci, you want to
7 to
continue?
2.
Or did you sort of
The
comment?
the motion fails, so.
I think that we can agree that we missed the collaborative approach. And I think that's how we got here tonight. I think it's frustrating to both sides because I think the administration feels like, they're doing their best to, put these goals in front of us. We're sitting here saying it's not exactly what we want. We're trying to tell you what we want in email and conversations and the board meeting. I think the retreat worked well last year. Again, I voiced my displeasure that I felt one of these two meetings were going to be that. was going to be that. And that was the way when I walked out of the last retreat we had. That said, I think we have to agree that we can move forward and make sure we hit this a little harder next year. And I think we start a little earlier so that we're not rushed and we don't feel this pressure and you guys don't feel like, we're attacking the goals and we don't feel like they're getting shoved down our throats.
Are there some freedom of adjustment and like adding some executive summaries, are the things we can do in the coming months? Instead of, it's not like it has to be totally cast in stone, does it?
Free to technically update our goals at any time, right?
The goals, as we talked about last week, the principals, the Act 93 team, we meet here next week and we hash it out, what their parts of each goal is, and then they start working on their action plans next week for next year. Having things that you want us to look at or want us to do that's not part of the goals is not a problem. You're the school board. If you want to do a survey next year, let's do a survey. So that's that, but the things that are directive and focused for our accomplishment, that's tied to my evaluation, tied to my team's evaluation here at the cabinet, tied to the principal's evaluation, and in turn, the goals out there in the buildings with teachers' goals are around what your priorities are. And so as Keith talks about.
Not our priorities.
And so if you want us to do a survey next year, then we can do a survey next year. We have to be able to fund it. But that's, if it's a costly thing, that's about the only thing. If we can do it within the budget, then we do that.
Is there any reason why something like that example couldn't be added to the goal in August or September? Because like in other words, that's not a life-changing, course-correcting goal that's going to change what principal buildings are going to do, right? I mean, I think as long as this is setting enough of a charter for you and your team and everyone to work on over the summer, so you're not held, like in limbo.
Yes, sir.
Then why can't we fiddle around the edges a little bit, add some things to it that are agreeable?
I think having a
and then they're in the goal so that we can
very
measure.
healthy, positive discussion around it would be great.
Right. I don't think we want to move the goalposts, but,
That's a great way to put it. That's a great way
we just
to
want to
put
be able to make sure we can ask for more data in the future.
Yes,
I
sir.
guess.
That's
But-
great. And you can ask now, ask anytime throughout the summer, fall, winter. We're here to serve.
Well, can we ask for data on the discipline issue, for instance? We've
Yes,
gotten
ma'am.
a lot of
We can spend
feedback
some
on
time
that.
and look at a summary of how this past year went, and look at from the SRO reports to what we have in Power School or in other places, and give you a baseline.
Okay.
And then that'd be a healthy committee discussion, bringing it to the board.
Can you also show with that, like, using the example of the SRO reports and suspension reports, maybe over a period of time, like a graph that shows how
Yes,
it's
sir.
moving
Yes,
up and
sir.
down?
Well, I get the intent.
Okay, thank you.
Can we still find out about the incentive pay? I still don't know. So my example that I gave in my email was, incentive pay should not be based on percentage completion. Incentive pay should be based off of performance that you've done above and beyond, that's my opinion. So, that being said, we could have a system that would say, if you got between proficient and proficient plus, whatever, you get this percentage. If you get between this and this, you get this percentage. And I'm not really clear on how we're measuring that.
It's supposed to be objective, and what you're describing is, I think it would be quite subjective, in my opinion, but I'm open for a discussion.
I think it's actually, I think the framework is the way I see incentive pays are on a scale, right? So, and it's used to incentivize, so it's obviously not part of your base salary because it's not guaranteed money. That's why it's, an incentive. And so the way I see it is, you know, on almost like a Likert scale, where you have, you know, if you've performed at, you know, you've reached, I mean, I think if you reach 95% of your goals, I don't know you get any closer to being at the top. You know, that would sort of be, you know, like 90 and above would be full.
Doing your job.
Yeah. But if you simply show up and do your job, you know, you're kind of middle of the road, right? So you have to exceed it in some capacity in order to. So I think you have to set it up, that, in my mind, that's the way it would seem to work.
That's why the goals need to be structured in such a way that, you know, you're shooting past the goalpost, right? That's what we want. That's what the incentive's for.
It is, but, you know, there's got to be, I think, also some latitude that the board has to, I mean, you know, one of the things that's not factored in these goals is what if something major happens in our school district and these guys are pulled out of their game for a month handling it, you know, and they get set behind in their goals, and their incentive pay is only reflective of their goals, and we have no, I mean, we have to have some flexibility to say, you know, while you didn't meet maybe all your goals but you've dealt with this major incident, and you did a fine job, that therefore we can somehow flex that up, and so to make it strict around simply the fact that it's, you know, percentage-wise, you hit this goal or this goal or this goal, I think it's a little.
The incentive pay is written in the contract, but the amount of money, bonus, whatever you want to call it, that we offer, we can change that at will.
No, but it's based on goals.
Right, but to your point about it, some kind of crazy emergency happening and you don't want to penalize these guys, well, the goals can be what the goals are, and we still have the leeway to put it wherever we choose to cover that kind of a crisis. That's just a specific point to your example.
But then we would grade based on the fact that we know that that crisis had ensued. So when we are scoring, you know, we would be accommodating for the fact that something unfortunate happened or whatever to.
Well, not if we paint ourselves into a corner by just saying simply it's only based upon objective criteria.
I think I like that because sometimes there's outside circumstances that do, like you're working your tail off and we could see like you're really pushing, but an outside circumstance, I think in that case, we could make an exception, maybe give us ourselves an wiggle room for the board to make an exception in that case. But since we're no longer basing a lot of these goals on percentage completion, and we're talking about targets, how are we going to say how much of the incentive pay is given?
So I think we need an equation.
I'm with you.
So, for example, all the domains aren't equal in my mind. The most important ones are those that heavily impact student achievement, you know, the academics. So another approach is, exactly, not only are they prorated per domain, but, you know, it's also, we have a set of crazy number of metrics down in those last three pages of actual student achievement. And if we make 50% of the incentive based on that and 50% based on our, you know,
culture,
1 to 5 grading or something like that.
Right,
I like that.
The budget's like 10%, right? Like
Yeah, right. Some of that stuff, I mean, Zach, he does you know, he does the budget stuff with his, you know, left hand type of 100, but no, I'm just kidding.
Are we going to do a 1 to 5, speaking of that?
What's that?
Are we going to do a 1 to 5? Because based on this, it's
easier than
not.
a 4-point scale. But, and then you don't get anything for 1 and 2s. So, but, you know, like, that's how I could see being able to still, you know, our ultimate, you know, the very first sentences in there is, we want to build college and career-ready children, and we have metrics by which we measure our success doing that. That should be a large factor of the incentive pay. And the rest is, you know, a little bit more subjective, pass-fail, plus, you know, like you said, there could be some extenuating circumstances, and that gives us more leeway to kind of handle both.
I like it.
I don't know if that's amenable to the.
I mean, I know what you're saying, but I don't agree with the sentiment that, you know, maybe academics should get more weight than culture of safety or diversity? Because these are all important in their own aspect.
Well, they are, because they should actually help make the students achieve higher. So it's still the primary
Academics is the
goal.
main point of the school.
Yeah.
That's what
We're-
school's
we're here
supposed to be
to
about.
teach
It's
and-
more than anything else.
More than just opening a book and memorizing it.
Well, in
yes,
the
but it's
U.S., unfortunately, it kind of
learning.
isn't. But
And I think that is, you can measure that to a certain
we like
extent.
factory schools.
Jeff, do you have any suggestions on how other districts do this?
Well, I guess the question is you have before you the goals. This other discussion about the manner in which you measure the performance in order to get to incentive pay really has to be a, lack of a better word, collaborative approach between administration and the board. So I don't know that you're going to be able to achieve that tonight when you're talking about goals, but I think that for the purposes of the board and administrators, administration, superintendent and like, it would be a good thing if you could arrive at some clear methodology on how incentive pay is awarded, provided you don't do things which has a disproportionate and difficult impact on administration.
Do we do that at a later
As-
time then, maybe, or?
As I shared with the board, when we sent out the draft yesterday, day before, for 20 years, at least, the practice of the board and the practice of my team, your team out there in the audience, and all the others that receive incentive pay have made their decision on their career, their location, and where to work in our district or not, based on salary plus performance incentive, because that's part of your, you have for your administrative team a lot at risk. And how that has worked out for in the past on when we're doing the metric piece, when we had the previous metrics that's not before you, but we had for 2 years, if at the elementary level, the 5 or 6 metrics were not met at that level for academic achievement, the elementary principals did not receive that. At the middle school, there are 5 or 6 or 7, they did not receive that, if they only what you met on your metrics. At the high school, if you didn't get it done, then you didn't receive it. And the total combined for the district office, anyone who works in the district office, then you took the pain from all the different areas of you didn't receive it. And it's the goals that we have here, I put them up against anybody in Pennsylvania. Other superintendents, at least in this county, have said to me, my gosh, what are you doing? And what you expecting? We have done some really heavy lifts, and if there's going to be any kind of discussion about how this has been done over at least 20 years, you're going to be involving not just me in that discussion. You're going to be involving all them out there in the discussion.
Sir-
But that's the way the system's set up in the contracts between you and them, and you and me, you and Nancy, Zach and I. And so it's been tied to our goals. That's been the practice. So if you change that, that has to be mutually agreed upon.
Of course.
Change it, though. I
I
don't
mean-
understand what you mean change it.
I think what he's saying is the practice has been that if he gets an incentive pay, that means that the other administration gets that incentive pay, but it's not, you just mentioned something, because I'm a believer in having ownership of that incentive. I used to always hate working for places where I didn't feel like I could really impact. So just as an example, let's say the superintendent doesn't do so well in their evaluations, but you're a rock star principal. And as much as you could have impacted and exceed your goals, then you should get paid out on your specific work. Otherwise, I feel like an incentive pay is meaningless if you're basing it off of something you can't control. So is it a direct, what you get paid in your incentive pay, is that exactly what all the rest of the administration gets paid? Or is it based on a separate criteria?
It's based on different percentages depending upon what level of the organization you are.
So then I guess where I'm not sure that I understand what you're saying about if they have different criteria than you, how does the way that we structure your criteria impact them?
It's, what they get is based on what I get, and then by percentage and all that. I'll let Ms. Edwards.
Wait a minute.
First of all,
It's on the completion of the goals.
yeah, it's based on the completion of the goals. And so, and a lot of thought went into the design of the performance incentive in the Act 93 agreement over the last 20 years. It is a group incentive. It is not an individual incentive because we are all in this together. And the thinking in those discussions was that we don't want to foster an unhealthy kind of competition between people. We want everybody to be working together to achieve the district's objectives together. So the percent complete of the goals, it's required to be an objective measure, not a subjective one. And the percent complete of the goals is what is applied to the incentive calculation at each level of the organization. But it is a group incentive for the Act 93 group, not an individual one.
So the example that he gave earlier, if you were in an elementary school and you're the head principal, and it's a poor performing elementary school for whatever reason, if you are the high school and you're a principal or a middle school principal and you're a rock star and you're knocking it out of the park because they performed, they underachieved, everybody else is penalized for it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. It's a 60-40, at the principal level, it's a 60-40, 60 based on the whole district and 40% based on the level. So it does have an impact by level, but it is not an individual incentive.
So
the goal is try to get everybody to help everybody else so we all do better.
God,
Instead of, I guess.
they're crazy.
It's fostered an environment where, at the building level, our teams are incredibly collaborative. They support each other, they work together, and they are all about improving instruction and outcomes for every student in the district, not just the students in front of them.
I think I like the idea of part of it being that, but 60% is based off of something that's out of their control.
They contribute to it. Everybody contributes to it.
It's like,
Yeah. Everybody contributes to every one of the goals in one way or another.
But when you want a successful building to share with somebody who's struggling and help them rise up.
Yeah,
So I think that's
definitely.
that's what that is.
But that's only 40%. So she just mentioned it's 64.
No. 60% is based on the district. So if you have one building who wants help, then the other building would help them. Where if it was 100% of that building, they'd be like,
So let me just clarify that because I didn't understand that. So can you explain the 60% part? Because the whole reason we're having this conversation is because we're talking about your incentive pay goals impacting their incentive pay goals.
There's one set of goals. The district has goals. And we all are working to achieve the same goals at every level in the organization. So you approve a percentage complete of the goals. That percentage is applied to the incentive calculation for each person or group that receives an incentive. At the building level, 60% of their incentive is calculated based on the percent complete for the whole district.
Did you catch that, Rob?
And 40%.
That's different than what you just said.
40% is calculated based on the percent complete for their level.
See, so the 40% is, and I like the idea of having, like you said, lifting each other up and creating that team environment, but that only encompasses 40%, whereas 60% is based off of how they do on the administration does on their goals.
No, it's how all of us do.
it starts here, but it's
But
all the goals.
Right.
Right, but if you're talking about calculating, so let's say last year, 96.6% goals completed from this last year, that goes into the 60% calculation, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, everybody tracking? So what I'm trying to say is, and I understand that collectively with these goals, because I know what you guys do, is you incorporate these goals into their goals, so it makes sense.
And they incorporate it into teacher goals, because without alignment, the organization is not going to move. So we can't have one set of goals that apply to us, and buildings have different goals that apply to them, because if you have that kind of misalignment, you're going to be going all over the place.
I'm actually okay with the structure, but what I don't understand how all of this is relevant to us trying to determine what the measurement for incentive goals are.
Well, the measurement is defined as the % complete of the board-approved district goals. That is how.
But that's never been agreed on by us.
Well, that's the practice, that's what's in the contracts, and it's what's been happening here for 20 years.
No, the contract states that annually, and I stated this
Right,
earlier, that the board annually decides
Goals.
on the incentive pay criteria.
Which is the goals.
It's not specific on that, actually.
But that has been our practice here.
Okay,
Like I said, for 20 years, at least.
Okay, if I hear, I swear to God, guys, we keep on talking about the way things have been, but I think an incentive pay should give you incentive to go above and beyond, and it has to be tied to performance, specific performance. And even in your example, it's going to be hard to do that this year, because now we don't just have percentage complete. We also have metrics. So how are we going to calculate this?
I already have a spreadsheet built that will do exactly that at the end of the year.
You built it! Oh my gosh, I can't.
Do you want to build it?
Look, it should be a collaboration. It should be a collaboration. They shouldn't say, oh, you know what? I'm going to decide on whether or not I get my incentive pay myself. I'm going to calculate that.
That sounds like a trust issue.
It's not even a trust issue as much as it's a plain oversight issue, and that's the reason why government is set up in a way that you don't have one singular person determining.
Mitchell, there is an entire book of documentation to support the calculation of the completion of goals, and if you would like to review it, you are welcome to do so.
That is not what my issue that I'm taking issue with. We never agreed as a board on the measurements that were used for you to get your incentive pay. How can someone get a proficient rating and still get 96% of their incentive pay?
That's an excellent question. How could someone get 96% of their goals complete and get a proficient rating? So I would turn the question around.
I will answer that question, because that just goes to show you that percentage completion is not a good indicator of success and performance. It can't be just based on, did you do it or you didn't do it? Because you could do it and not do it to the level that we're grading you on that scale of 1 to 5.
So can I ask this question? Do we have to discuss, and do we have to come up with that formula tonight as far as incentive pay calculation?
For next year, they'd like that, it seems, for next year.
Well, right. So the question is, can we have that done in an executive session?
We can always do it after, we can do it tonight still.
I don't know.
We can do it right now if.
But my question is, can we take this, because I think it needs a little bit more thought and not just winging it, because again,
I think
if we approve the goals, we want to set the administration up to be successful. Here's your goals. Here's what you do to accomplish your goals. I mean, they have their tactics, and then here's the incentive that's associated with completion of the goals.
Yeah, and the sooner that they have everything in place, the better they can change their
start working
behavior.
on their goal,
Correct.
right?
And I think if we have at least reasonable agreement that as I said earlier, that the basic charter that's in here is good enough for them to get started, we can fiddle and tweak and do some things that aren't substantial and do it with,
But I think
grace.
I think to that end, I think you weight it as we discussed. What are the priorities of the school district, right? Educating kids, right? So maybe that's a weighted goal of 60%, and then they can focus on those. I hate to pin them down, but like really the finances, like you have to kind of be at budget, right?
I'm with you.
100% of their bonus there.
10%
And that's the point.
Budget, 100% of your bonus.
All right.
So what are we going to do from here, I guess? What do you guys want to do?
I don't think we have the time to do what you want, Caitlin, this evening. And I think that's my initial concern, like right now.
Well, there's no, it's clear, but it's 9:10 already. So my thought is that we can push this to an executive session. It doesn't have to be done this month.
Right.
We just have to, I think we have to come up with an agreed upon formula that we say, yes, this is how we'll do it. And it's just my suggestion, I'm just saying.
I think it's pretty simple. You can have, if we're going to use a 5-point system, just as an example, you can say from getting from this point, if you arrive at a performance between this point and this point, you get this percentage, this point and this point, you get this percentage. Like, it doesn't have to be so complicated, but.
So I make I don't know if it's time to make a motion, but I'm thinking of making a motion that says, let's move on with approving the goals with the understanding that we'll then have further,
State that.
then we'll have further
I
conversations.
don't think you need to make a
Okay.
motion.
No, you do, I think, because we're voting on the goals and we're making it clear that we're not voting on incentive pay measurements tonight.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought that's what we were, okay.
Does that make sense, or no?
I didn't know we had to do that, but all right, that's fine.
I think we just need to be crystal clear.
We are only voting on the goals here tonight.
Yes, sir, but the goals are the points to which the incentive is based on. So if you're approving the goals, that's what the incentive is based on, percent complete.
But what's the equation?
For next year.
But what
For
is the
next year.
equation, sir?
Right. Let me just add a little wrinkle. The Act 93 agreement does reference goals and the pay of incentive pay. So you better be careful because there are contractual obligations to your non-cabinet level administrators to have specific language in their Act 93 agreement related to how you determine whether incentive pay is paid or is not. So you need to
It's going to be based on the goals, though. We're not saying we want it to be outside of the goals.
percentage of goals in the, talks about the school. I'm saying you need to look at that before we go down there.
So it sounds like we just need to have a little bit, dig deeper into this because,
See all the ramifications, because it's not just the superintendent, the assistant superintendents. And the other thing is, one of the reasons why your compensation levels for administrators are not necessarily equal to other county districts, but you have the incentive pay, which is another thing that other districts don't have. So you need to look at your whole payroll kind of approach, because you want to keep good people here, and that's one of the reasons why you may not pay a base salary as much as you would somewhere else, but you have the incentive component that's an attraction to people that come to work here. So you need to look at all those
Well,
elements.
no, and I think that's a very valid point. But to that end, I think, if somebody's walked up to you and they said, how do you rate, how do I know if I'm going to get my incentive pay? And we say, you accomplish your goals. And then I say, but we weight our goals on a scale, that things that are important to us versus not. So, and I definitely agree with you. It's something you absolutely have to factor.
we just don't know the equation. I think that's where we are right now. We don't,
Jeff?
because we're not doing the goals based on just a percentage. There's also more complexities to performance. For instance, academic, now we actually have specific numbers that we're going to be driving for academic performance. That doesn't fall into a percentage completion. So we need to figure out an equation. I think that's just where we are.
Was there any deadline mentioned in that initial look over, like a date deadline that we should be aware of?
I think it says something like October, the performance incentive is paid as lump sum after September 30. So I guess
That's Act 93.
that's your Act 93 agreement, so.
Right, but the
That's
deadline,
last year.
the goals that we set here, if we're going to make any addendums to maybe something, if we approve it today, for example, we want to layer in another set of standards or something, we have the right to change it over the next few months,
I need to look-
or embellish.
I need to look more carefully at the Act 93 agreement. I'm just looking at a piece of it here. So
So-
whether you can add or change really depends on the clear language of that, and I don't want to give you.
But I think that's important as what we all want to do right now, right? So I don't think anybody wants to give them the nod on this as it exists without knowing that we have the right to kind of make some minor adjustments without moving the goalpost. per se.
My recommendation to the board is that you look under the measurement for completion of the goals under each one of the domains, and that's the administration's recommendation.
But that's not a measurement of how well you did it. You could do something and it may not be
That's
done well.
administration for 1920, that's what the administration recommends to the board. They are incredibly rigorous goals and objectives, a lot of work, and that's what we recommend.
If I heard you correct, Mr. Garten, this is contractual, correct?
Well, I think the thing that sometimes we lose track of is that when you talk about these district goals, perhaps there's too much, well, there's focus that's appropriate on senior staff, but how you arrive at the goals and how you measure the goals has a rippling effect throughout your entire administrative staff, whether it's principals or whatever. So you need to look at this thing globally as well as to the assistant superintendents, the superintendents, and the like. So I'm only asking that you make sure you look at it globally so you understand the implications with respect to the entire workforce who are in the Act 93 agreement.
So I'm reading it right now, and I think this is relevant. The incentive will not, it says the performance incentive will be paid, as you were mentioning, in a lump sum. The incentive will not be made part of the base salary. At least one goal will be a group goal for all members of the administrative unit. At least one goal will be established by level, elementary, middle, high school. The goals for the coming year will be established by October 15th. So that's the date it appears that we have until to determine that. Of each year based on the superintendent's goals as approved by the board school directors. These goals will be reduced to writing with performance standards that allow for objective evaluation results. The incentive will be divided in equal portions among the Act 93 administrators involved with each goal. Okay? In each year of this agreement, the maximum amount of the performance incentive shall be increased from prior year percentage by the difference between 30, I'm just going to skip the number part, and then it goes to say 60% of the amount will be based on percentage completion of K-12 goals, and 40% of this amount will be based on goals by level, which is what we did discuss before. So in no way in here does it, obviously we need to make the incentives match the goals. We can't just make a goal for an incentive that doesn't match what we have here, but in nowhere that I'm reading here does it state that we as a board can decide how that incentive pay equation is mapped. And in fact, if you want further context for that, you can go to the contract, Dr. Horner's contract, where it does state that the board annually agrees on those criteria.
So in the document before us, if you look at the domain one, half of it's on the metrics and half of it's on the sort of the pass-fail stuff. It's completely calculatable. I mean, I frankly am a little fearful about the specificity. I mean, it's great to see that we hope to increase the PSAT scores by 3%, right? We hope to have, make sure NOCTI stays above 85%. These are freaking ridiculously specific at every level. I mean, maybe you didn't read these pages, but, the equation is, as it's set up, the only thing that I see maybe missing is the differentiation between the domain weighting. Because I think domain one is really, really, really important. And to your point about financing, it's almost like if we don't do that, someone's going to probably be behind bars. But nonetheless, even as written, I could go up to the board and write an equation.
Write it.
Okay, so it's domain one, right? Think of it, parent, that I'm going to compute it. Domain one is 50% of A, B, C, D, E, and then the rest is all of these, page 10, 11, 12.
So are you going to say all of these are going to be, because first of
Yes,
all,
because it says and there's a little bit of, target exceeded, target met. Right, so there's even some, what I would say, some gradation there. And then the only problem is I'm going to add up domain one plus domain two. I would like to put modifiers on front of each one of those to say, like, I think domain one is 50% of the grade. so to speak. Domain 2 is maybe, I don't know, maybe have to think about that. At the moment, they're equally weighted, I guess, Nancy Ann, in the spreadsheet, but nonetheless, there's everything here that could be used to create that equation. It's all black and, well, it's red and some black. But it's pretty much black and white.
But those don't encompass every single goal in domain 1 and 2. They only encompass certain ones. And then what about domains 3 through 5 that don't have any measurements?
Well, they have the pass-fail ones.
Right. Which,
so what's wrong with that?
Well, I don't like pass-fail. I think I'm clear why I don't.
Did we implement an MLK day? How are you going to grade that?
Some of those are appropriate. I'm not saying that some of those are appropriate.
Well,
I've stated that previously, but what I'm trying to say.
They're all appropriate.
No, I don't. I think that's not the case.
Well, then you need to give some feedback.
Add and subtract those yes/no.
All right, so can I go back to a question we had before you started your equation? The incentive pay. Is that, so if we vote tonight to table that discussion until we can agree upon it, is that in violation of the contract?
No, because it's based on goals.
Right.
So you establish the goals.
The goals will be established.
Goals will be
Incentive pay will
established.
be based on goals.
Based on goals, yes.
So there's no contractual
Well,
issues.
the contractual obligations are that for senior administrators, that the goals you said here is an element and a factor in how they get their incentive pay is paid.
Absolutely.
Right.
Correct.
So goals is a long way, is most of where the incentive pay will be derived.
Absolutely.
Right.
So,
okay, I see what you're saying. So it's not based on proficient, distinguished, that has
it's
not
not.
to do.
Contract
That
does
all,
not identify
that's
those
only
categories.
goals. Okay,
Right,
that's
only
fair.
goals.
That's fair.
now, okay, but I'm gonna
It is.
just
It is
mention
fair.
though that it does say that it's based off of the goals. However, it doesn't state, let me go back to this. It doesn't say how we calculate it, basically. And I think all we're asking for here is, what is the calculation here?
So, and I think that's what we can go back to that table, right? We can go back and,
The Act 93 talks about percentage completion of goals.
yes.
So that's in the Act 93. How you measure the weighting of those goals is not in the Act 93 agreement.
Correct.
It's about percentage of completion, yes.
Right.
Where does it say percentage in completion as it pertains to incentive plans? I'm not seeing that.
Look at the fifth line down.
5.
Or sixth line down. Says to the left for the percentage completion of goals.
Performance incentive was paid as a lump sum for the percentage completion of goals in the 2013-14 school
Each
year.
year thereafter, though.
Yeah.
So I think that's, so that's really, we're not changing that, right? So that's staying the same. Percentage of goals completed.
Well, we can also interpret percentage of goal to be completed by saying if we didn't feel like something was done to the standard that we want, that it wasn't completed.
Yeah, because you have to
Well,
determine whether the goals are met.
Right.
And I see what you're saying, and
I don't think it should be pass-fail is all I'm saying. I think we have some liberty to say if we feel like a goal, how well a goal was completed could determine what we would decide the percentage completion.
I think to that end, no, I think that it gets a little bit of splitting hairs at that point, right? Because that then it goes from an objective measurement to a subjective measurement. So how would you rate that they didn't do?
Well, that's why everything should be measurable. We're going back to.
I disagree. I mean, Caitlin, we do this all the time. One of my goals this year for my department was that I do a tabletop exercise on large-scale incident that took place involving a downed helicopter. That was my goal. So it was, at the end of the day, did I do that or not? What went into that, I didn't have to justify that to my boss at all, that I had to have, 6 months of meetings, meet with all these, folks. That's not part of my goal.
No, I'm talking about the outcome of your goal, though. Did you do it well?
It was a yes or no. At the end of the day, it was a yes or no. And so that.
So
that
then where,
happens.
but
Like,
but
I don't
then
know that-
how does it factor
It
into?
wasn't like I did it then my boss did come back and said, well, I know you did that, But to me, you only did, like 75% of it. You accomplished the goal, but it was 75% worth. You got like a C+ on the way you handled it. That's what I think we're talking about, and I think that's where you start splitting hairs. There's other incentives that I have that are clearly around data metrics, right? So, finances and how well I operated the budget and, where I am relative to volumes last year versus this year. I mean, there are certain things that are important, and so that are clear, here's the data, right? The data is, the objective numbers.
Do they ever hold you to patient outcome?
Absolutely. Hospitals are held to patient outcomes all the time. Yes.
That's a tough one, right?
Absolutely. And they're held to, patient
Readmits,
satisfaction scores,
right.
and they're held to, how well was you, did you develop an infection while you're in a hospital? I mean, there's a lot of things that they are that really, some would argue, like we're having here, it's like out of our control, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're malnourished and you don't, you have
You don't
all
follow
kinds of
orders.
comorbidities and come in the hospital, you have a likelihood that you're going to
Right.
get sicker.
You don't come to school, you don't study. Yeah, it's tough.
There are certain things that are in our control and certain things that are outside of our control, but I would say that you absolutely have these cases where it's pass-fail.
I'm not arguing that.
And I don't want to get into, I don't really think that we can get into, I think I agree with you to some extent that doing something that's, just to check the box is what we're worried about.
We're getting into the weeds, though, because what we're trying to determine is, since our goals are not based on pass-fail percentage completion, okay, right now, how are we going to decide if something was percentage completed when it comes to the academic scores, for instance? How would you calculate that?
Mr. Klein, could I interject?
They have the targets on academic scores.
Yeah, I think that's the
SAT
clearest
scores are
part.
black and white.
Yeah, I think that's the clearest part of what
Yeah,
we're talking about.
That to me was the easiest because it's right here.
But see,
Yeah,
what
while
we
we're
don't
talking-
have determined, though, is what percentage of your incentive pay do you get for each of those categories?
Well, personally, I don't think we should go to a weighting system because human nature would be if you have 50% of your grade in one domain, you're going to spend 50% of your time in that domain. So,
Well, that would be, we would want that. If we don't want that, then we don't do that,
right?
Yeah, that's the whole point. If we want to emphasize 50% of your grade is based on this, then we do it. If we don't, we don't. So, but.
Yeah, that's my
Mr. Klein, can I say something?
Wait, one more thing, though, I know I've talked a lot, I'm sorry, but before I lose it, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about each category, you get a percentage of the incentive pay, is what you just stated. So we don't have a clear understanding right now of target exceeded, target met, partially met, not met. Do we want to say that each category, you get a certain percentage? Does that make sense? So you just mentioned before that it's the most clear thing that we have in here is where those data points fit into each of those categories. So that being said, if we were to say, hey, you met all of your categories plus 5 or however we did it this year, then we'd have a specific outline of how much you're going to get of your incentive pay based on the specific grading of the targets that are outlined here.
So,
Go.
So, Mr. Jackson, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say one really quick thing. Can I make a suggestion? We break this into two things. Let's first approve the darn goals. I think they're in the right direction. The big things are there. And then we can have a conversation about, how do we calculate this again? Maybe Nancy Ann can show us the spreadsheet. I can wax eloquent on the blackboard with equations, and then we can debate that part separately. Because we're not getting anywhere. We're just talking around. I've heard the same conversations for an hour.
We agree that it is based on the goals. Incentive pay is based on the goals, percentage completed. What we're trying to figure out is the total percentage. How do you figure out total percentage completed? So, and Nancy said earlier that she has a formula already. Wouldn't mind seeing what that looks like. And we go from there and say yes or no, right?
Mr. Jackson, you had something to say?
Are we ready to move on to the next question before I say anything?
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
All right. Mr. McCucci intoned earlier that I was, I can't remember what the exact term is, you were appalled at my suggestion. I want to remind everybody what we are in the middle of right now, and that was the discussion of the board goals. Now, some of us came here today believing that we were going to break into executive session to have a roundtable discussion. That did not occur. However, we spent the last 2 hours, most people, well, I shouldn't say most, let's just do it this way. Some people saying that the goals in front of us were awful, were just abysmal and shouldn't be addressed. Some of us believing it was okay. We were told to go home last week, put our lists together of how we thought we should amend those goals from last week. Thankfully, Mr. Diliberto did a diligent job and put those forward. I'm not aware of anybody else who did so. If I'm mistaken, I'm mistaken.
You are mistaken.
Did you put yours back to the administration before Monday?
Sir, I sent mine in first thing on Tuesday morning, and I totally understand, but this is the thing. The administration met Monday afternoon, so if I would have sent it out Monday night, it wouldn't have been taken in consideration anyway.
And
but anyway, yes, I did provide the feedback, so.
No, okay, granted. But my point is.
Did you provide any feedback?
No, I did not, because
No,
I
you
felt.
didn't.
No, I didn't. I felt the goals were fairly good, and I believe Mr. Diliberto did a good job in incorporating his, would have sufficed a lot of my comments as well. That being said, we just spent the last 2 hours saying why we thought the goals were unworthy, yet we could have taken that time to do exactly what we thought we were going to do in a roundtable. We could have taken each one of these goals point by point and made them our own. Instead, we spent the whole time bickering about why we didn't like them or why we did like them, and we're about to move on past this question, and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed since I made the motion to end debate. We're going to have to approve these goals. We're not happy with them. We're going to have a lot of work going forward to improve them. We knew that then when I made the motion, and we know that now.
Are you seriously right now trying to defend yourself? Because that is ridiculous.
My point is simply that I think we wasted a lot of time.
You're right. You're right. We're wrong, right?
No. I think we wasted a lot of time not discussing the individual goals like we thought we would when we got here
We
today.
could have avoided all this had we had the collaboration to begin with. It would not be this painful. It wouldn't be all this bickering if we actually sat down as a team and all had input on these goals. But that didn't happen, and that's where we are.
We are sitting down as a team. The problem is nobody put forth a goal to discuss. Instead, we ripped apart the idea of the goals in their entirety.
What is your point you're trying to make?
We could have gone through the goals one by one, talked about them, and shaped them the way we wanted to.
And I agree with you. We should have done that, or we should have done that a month ago.
We were supposed to do that here tonight.
No, that is, I think we're all unclear on that.
We were, right? Am I wrong? Exactly. That's why we were supposed to be here, but it never happened.
Last week, that's what we were supposed to do.
But
this
no,
week, we were supposed to do what we did last week.
We got it down. I felt like it was a good discussion. I think we put some meat around our arguments. I agree. I don't think it was a waste. I do think.
No, it's a retreat topic.
It is definitely something we need to focus on for next year, where we can't lose sight of how we got to here, this 2.5-hour discussion. And I appreciate it being in a public forum, but I thought we handled it really nicely as an executive session last year, and then rolled it out to the public where we looked like we knew what we were talking about, as opposed to now where
it's embarrassing.
It's not, trying to write formulas on paper next to each other. So I agree, though. It's time, I think, to move on, and I'm still 100% not clear on the incentive pay, but I mean, I think that we have a good understanding of it. The question is, who calculates that? Is there somebody?
She does. She calculates
you do
her
it?
own incentive pay. Ms. Edwards calculates her own incentive pay. Is that better?
You do it for the whole district then? You do it for everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Collect all the evidence and all of the spreadsheet from this year was provided to you in the final goals report.
Right,
So if
right.
there's any question about any of it, I have invited questions about it multiple times.
Right, okay.
Yet we
so-
never saw it, we never ever did see it, never even voted specifically on incentive pay. You gave yourself your own incentive pay.
So.
That's
based on
out of
percentage
line.
goals.
That's out of
It's
line.
true.
That's
Prove
out of
me
line.
wrong. Prove me wrong.
Meeting minutes from June 14th, 2018, item number 18D, according to the meeting minutes, approval of the superintendent's goal.
That has nothing to do with incentive pay, sir.
Motion made by David Akmanowitz, seconded by Kalen Mitchell.
Okay, is there an incentive pay in there? Goals are separate from incentive pay.
No, but you did question whether or not you
No.
approve the goals. You
But we never
questioned whether or not you
determined
approve
what
the
the
goals.
criteria of what those goals are, how they, we never had a conversation once about incentive pay.
Wait.
Not once.
We didn't have, if the contract is total goals, what we didn't have conversation on was percentage of goals completed means what?
Well, we actually didn't even approve the grade they gave themselves, I think is the point.
We did.
We
absolutely
approved the goals, the standards that we wanted them, as he pointed
Guys,
out in the
here's
goals.
deal. Goals are set. Incentive pay is based on goals. So once you set the goals, you set incentive pay. What we didn't do was and this is the area we're discussing now, which is the level of goals complete equals what in incentive pay.
Maybe
we
when I
did-
asked about this a year ago,
We did approve 97.2% of the goals were completed. We approved that at the same time as well. So it was approved. You
No,
may not
in
have
the contract-
You may not have understood it,
no, I understand it fine. In fact, I think I did
but you
quite a bit of
approved
research.
it at the time.
No, it says at least one, the incentive pay will not be made part of the base salary. At least one goal will be a group goal for all the members of the administrative unit. And it goes on to talk about different goals by different levels and things like that. It doesn't clearly tell us, though, how we go about calculating to get to the percentage of goal. And look, it was just never clear.
So we're
If
gonna
it
make
wasn't clear, that's one
We're
thing,
gonna-
but to say we didn't do it and that that you didn't do something that you did is a completely different statement.
18.
That is my perception.
I make a motion
It's-
to move on to Part B of this, and then maybe we'll add drones.
Second.
Putting other things in the bill, sir.
Okay, do I have I guess by that, Mr. Kern, that was a motion to approve the 2019-2020 district superintendent goals.
Move on to the next topic.
That,
No, I think,
He said B.
Can we agree that we're
can we
ready to
just
go?
agree with that we'll vote on the goals now?
I don't think we need a
Yes.
motion.
The motion should be to approve the goals for
That is-
2019.
That is the
Correct.
motion.
No, we didn't.
That is the motion.
Mr.
That was the
Kern?
motion.
Would you like to amend your motion?
I amend the motion. Can we please approve the 2019-2020 district superintendent goals
As presented.
as presented?
It's already on the table.
Second.
Motion.
That's not the motion he made.
And we were doing the discussion.
He was asking to end discussion. He just amended it to, let's vote on it
Oh,
now,
all right.
okay? Should this be a roll call vote?
Hell yeah.
Let's see what you hear first before.
Okay. The motion was made by Mr. Kern, it was seconded,
Mr. Jackson?
Mr. Jackson, okay? All those in favor of approval of the 2019-2020 district superintendent goals as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 8-1. Okay, that moves us to information items. There is a transportation renewal with Plumstead Christian School for the 2019-2020 school year. There is the May 2019 student activity report. We have the board briefing book. There is summer hiring and also the Quakertown Boys Ice Hockey Club, which we heard about earlier. That brings us to new board business.
I'd just like to shout out to Mr. DiGilberto and your new coach for putting together the document that's there as an information item for the ice hockey team. It's great when we're getting more students involved in sports.
Thanks. And I think on the middle school team, too, it's grades 5 through 8. So if there's any elementary school principals out there, you can let the rising fourth graders know that they can start playing ice hockey. Always. And I had a comment, too. I don't want to cut you off.
Go ahead, sir.
I was at the Richland 8th grade, what's it called, rising ceremony? It's not called graduation, right?
Moving up day.
Moving up day. It was awesome. I thought Dr. Bubser did a great job. She really just conveyed how she felt about the students, that she cared about them, and it's important for them to feel good about themselves. Do you want to do your quote at the end, your wrap-up quote? No? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Do you have it memorized?
We can come back to her. No, it was really good, though. I never heard it before.
You'll have to come up to the microphone and state your place of residence.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
You can just do the end wrap-up quote. I thought that was awesome. Yeah.
Don't be shy.
Usually shy.
That's
Yeah, you
all
did.
right. All right, it went like this. Behind you, all your memories. Before you, all your dreams. Around you, all who love you. Within you, all you need. And then I just said, so cherish today, enjoy your last day in middle school tomorrow, and after tomorrow, create the future. You're welcome.
Very nice. I have a couple things. Is Dr. Culbreth here? Congratulations on your doctorate from Vanderbilt. And also, I just wanted to note that I see a lot of principals out there. Congratulations on another terrific job this year. I know you guys work really hard, and I know there's a lot of good things going on in your schools, so it's nice to see you all out there, and thank you for coming. Any other board comments? This brings us to our last public comment. Is there any public comment? Mr. Gottschalk, state your area of residence.
I will. Yeah, just very quickly. Scott Gottschalk, Richland Township, proud parent of 2 students here at Quakertown, one of which will be walking across the stage tomorrow. So very, very proud of that. What I wanted to do is publicly acknowledge the monumental work that's happening over at Neidig right now. As you know, we're packing up, moving things over to Tuhican Valley for the year. I wanted to thank Rob and the facilities department. They've moved this week, I think, 70 to 80 pallets just this week, in addition to the hundreds that have been going over to TV. Unbelievable amount of work going on by his team. And I really need to acknowledge the teaching staff at Neidig, too. I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that. In addition to closing down the school year, they are packing everything to the paper clip in their classrooms and boxing it up, labeling it, working together, really synergizing, I'll say. So I just wanted to make sure. I know you knew this or know this, but I wanted to acknowledge it because I'm really proud of them. They're doing an exceptional job. And I thank you for your ongoing support. The Neidig project out back is all dug up. You should see it. It looks fantastic. Well, it doesn't look fantastic, actually. But we're excited about the work starting. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would say, probably on behalf of the board, we're very grateful for you and all of the staff and being so cooperative in all of the moving the paper clips and packing all the books to just do it again next year. So our best to everybody, and thank you all for being such great members of the community and working so hard.
I'd like to invite the board in the summertime, anytime, let's go on over to Tuhican Valley, the new Neidig, the old Neidig, whatever, and see what's going on there. So Rob and his team's done a marvelous job. Teachers have already, staked out their new domain, and it's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to calendar items. Of course, tomorrow is commencement at Stabler Arena. That begins at 7. On August 1st at 6 is the Facilities Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. On August 8th at 7 is a work session, regular voting meeting here in the community room. And on August 22nd, we have the next Education and Curriculum meeting, the next Finance Committee meeting, and of course, a regular work session, regular voting meeting as well. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kern, do I have a second?
I got it.
That was Mr. Makucci. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.